Grand Rising. Why some need to be dumb, stupid, wrong. Dumb, stupid and wrong. Wrong, dumb and stupid. True Brit News. Why wasps remain dumb, wrong and stupid. I suppose I'd like to add this one too. Okay, and I'm going to do it in the form of integrating a little bit more history with current events, I suppose, or current affairs. Okay, so I'm going to begin by saying this. Where are we going to begin? Well, there's a thing on a report, an article, a news item on BBC News this morning, which is talking about some veterans that were involved in is it Pacific Ocean letting off bombs and stuff like that. I didn't watch it fully, but the bits that I saw, one of the things that they were arguing about or arguing for and talking about was how the successive British governments won't release the medical records of the soldiers that were exposed to whatever radiation after these bombs were dropped. And also they were talking about how they were inadequately sheltered from the blasts. So they were given basically sunglasses and no shielding or anything like that from these explosions that they were letting off in the Pacific, I believe it was. I'm intending for this video to be short and sweet. My intention, right? Okay. So, and there were some of the people that were on the program were the descendants, if you like, of some of the people that had been exposed. So they were, and the reason for the medical records is so that they're not too sure how many generations will be affected by those blasts, in terms of, like, as I say, the descendants through their genetics, through their genes. So there was a couple of people, they're adults now, but their fathers were exposed to this blast. And one of the things that they're arguing about is that they were never told, even though lots of tests were taken from those men that were exposed to that radiation at that time, and it's in their medical records. But the government, successive governments, although they have promised, including Keir Starmer, has promised they've been lobbying them for years to release these records, or at least give the records to the people, the descendants of the people that whose forebears were exposed to that. Those, what I'm going to consider as experiments. So we talk about experimentation here, under the guise of research, under the guise of war as well, because again, we're beginning to find out that the Second World War and the First World War and the in-between conflicts, some of them are not entirely about the colonisation or defending themselves against, I don't know, tyranny from another country or from another regime or from another ideology, i.e. fascism, etc. So what have we got here then? So one of the things that they are seeking is compensation. That's one aspect of this this report, I suppose, this video, is that the fact that they're seeking compensation, and how there are a number of communities or former, veterans, as an example, former colonized countries, former territories or territories that are, and people that are seeking compensation from the UK Crown Corporation. I may say something about that conversation that I've just had, because it's connected to this video anyway, and what I'm wanting to say. I'll see if I can do that. Anyway, so yes, I've just been talking about, before the interval, the Second World War, all wars, and people being experimented on, and people seeking compensation as a consequence of being exposed to this stuff, in warfare, or whilst doing works for Queen, King and country, and then to be abandoned by the state on their return. There's been lots of discussions and arguments and rants about veterans in this country for years, about the way that they've been treated, yet still no one does anything about it, and now it's coming out about what it is. It's not just about battle injuries. Well, I suppose it's all a battle injury, it's all battle injuries, but not all of them have been, some of it's been friendly fire, I suppose you have to say, then. And it seems as though the state continues, after all this while, and after the sacrifices that have been made, to take responsibility and accountability for the people that have fought in the name of the flag, whichever one it might be, for King, as I say, and country. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. That's King and country. Now I want to say this. During the Second World War, or just before or just after, I can't remember which, maybe just before, as we're about to enter into a war, there's a photograph, and I'm going to see if I can put it up here, where you've got Elizabeth II giving a Nazi salute. And I'm contemplating about, whether or not at that time whether or not they changed their name from their German name to Windsor, because it would make sense for her to do a Nazi salute if her stock and her heritage and her pedigree is of that ilk. I.e. is connected to a fascist regime, but not saying that they're a fascist regime, but clearly they are interlopers, illegitimate heirs to the throne, and and this is as far as I'm concerned. And actually, you can sort of see the changeover of when things started to, when this current crop of European aristocracy and royalty moved in. You can see it in the time of Cromwell, when James I is beating off what are described as rebellions or loyalists, Protestants, protesters, and royalists are having a scrap around the throne, and it's very hard to work out which faction was aligned to which label, i.e. royalist, loyalist, Protestant, etc. But what we can definitely say categorically, which again we don't necessarily talk about in the history of these islands, is what Cromwell did. He's actually celebrated in many ways as somebody that brought democracy and got a tyrannical king off the throne. But nothing could have been further from the truth. It was through Cromwell that the de-establishment of the true heirs to the throne was usurped by using legislation, and it's that legislation and the legal framework that was created around him, that was created in the country at that time, was used to claim that the king at that time, Charles the First, was beheaded anyway. They beheaded, and Charles II spent a lot of time trying to regain the throne. Hence all the wars and civil wars that were taking place in that era. Parts of the country still recognised him as the rightful heir. Meanwhile, you've got the Dutch and the German and the Frankists, and at the same time they're all related. But there's another, if you like, bloodline trying to move in on the true bloodline and heirs to the throne, and to the legitimate heirs were being replaced by the illegitimate lot that are around now. Okay? Another way you can verify this, again, I might throw some stuff up here just to validate, is it a claim? The fact, what it is that I'm saying. I'm not making a claim yet, but I will say that there are people right now making a claim. The Windrush generation, so-called, is making its claim. And again, I'm going to see if I can put some evidence of that up here to show you that as early as last week, whilst Charlie and Trump were all having dinner with all that pomp and ceremony and all the rest of it, if you look at the comms of that, it's quite interesting. Very interesting. But what it does for me, it signals something that nobody wants to talk about. It's signalling that there's a transfer of, or a return to the legitimate bloodline to the throne. And there was a meeting taking place at the House of Commons during that, whatever it was that Donald Trump was doing when he came to the UK and having dinner with Catherine and all that lot. Is it Catherine? Whoever it is. And they rolled out the royal, all the pomp and ceremony for that occasion. There were meetings taking place in the House of Commons. Also, another verifying factor is if you look at the notes of the currency we are currently using, you will see that Elizabeth II wearing a crown. But if you look at the more recent ones with Charles on them, you will see that he's not wearing a crown. I think this is all symbolic of the fact that he's no longer sovereign, even though he claims it, and he's able to act on it because he still has the consent of the United Kingdom citizens or citizenry. because it is the king and his family. Look, all the politicians, when they went into government, I can't remember what it was actually, they signed an oath to the king and his heirs, not to the people. So that's another signal. I mean, they've been doing that for ages, for years, for decades. They're not, their oath, their allegiance is not to the people. And now UK citizens, or the English, are beginning to realise that there is no commitment, there's no interest being shown for the people that inhabit these islands, the taxpayer, if you will. You know, for anybody, the only people that benefit are the people that have aligned themselves closely with and have the resources, i.e. the money that is given to them by the estate management company, which is the UK Crown Corporation. And the Crown is the king, and he's head of this particular branch of the it's a huge series of corporations or businesses, if you will. So, you know, and they are called colonies. These colonies is basically set up as business opportunities and trading partners with a particular specific agenda. So whilst America might be whatever it's claiming to be, it is well known that it remains to this day, although Donald Trump is dismantling it, separating themselves from that relationship, that famous, call it, that special relationship that we have with the US. We're now beginning to sort of see that it's not that special. And as Donald Trump not only dismantles the US corporation, it's dismantling all the ties to it and exposing all those ties and what those ties are all about, what they've been involved in, what the ideology is, and and what the benefits or the pros and cons of being of that relationship, the cost of that relationship over centuries, really. So that's what I wanted to say. I think 18 minutes just to say that, bloody hell. God. So hopefully there's a bit of history there. There's a few more bits that I wanted to say in terms of about that history. You know, I've talked about Cromwell and what was going on there. I've talked about how the different, I haven't said much about how the different royal families came to be. Hopefully I'll be able to sort of put some pictures up of the Queen, you know, doing a Nazi salute, which is a bit strange, but they're there, you know. I didn't take the picture, but you know, a lot of this information has been hidden deliberately and on purpose in order to continue, or for the current bloodline royal or elitist families across Europe and across the globe, actually, because they've infiltrated everywhere, and have influence everywhere through finance and all the rest of it, and through marrying into bloodlines and by taking out certain bloodlines, literally wiping them out. So that's what you've seen in those experiments that are taking place in Polynesian islands or wherever it was in the Pacific, when they're letting off all these atom bombs. What they're actually doing is, in my view, is that, you know, they are seeking to see how the body reacts to radiation. I mean, I could go on to something else about radiation, but just to say that melanin, and there are now, I'm beginning to discover and maybe I'll realise that there are more than one type of melanin that is produced in the body, and we're all able to produce melanin regardless of the If you're a human being, you can produce melanin, essentially. It's those who cannot, that's where they've got less of certain capacities, you know, to be able to deal with and utilize radiation. Yeah, we got it. She was going to try and fly across. Bitch. Yeah, I'm saying it as it is. You know, I'm not going to fuck about here. Done with that. Loads of that. Let me forget my thoughts, man. Well, this melanin thing, because it's one of the things it helps to do is stop the bullshit. You know, when you're exposed to it, we're able to absorb. People with dark skin, mostly, not because it's not about skin color, but like if you've got melanin, you've got neuromelanin, and this is the shit that they've known about. These scientists and governments have known about before the First World War, known it all along. The technology to be aware of this and try to. It's one of the reasons why they're blocking out the sun. It's radiation that comes from the sun. They're blocking it out because it gives melanated people, who are the majority of the people on the planet, it gives them energy. It gives them special powers. It gives them. I mean, and their special powers to be able to sit out in the sunshine. See? And there are certain communities, certain groups, certain races that struggle with it. You know, I mean, do you remember seeing not that long ago? Lots of Chinese people a few years ago, before COVID. Okay. Chinese people on these islands walking around with umbrellas in the sunshine in the summer. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. Sorry, I'm at a hold the wall. So. For that. Right, 23 minutes. I want to leave there and we'll cut it off there. I think I've said enough there. So, everywhere I seem to go, I've got some maniacs who are trying to fucking pull into car parks all across. You know what I mean? They're just like, don't look like they're going to stop. And I don't think they want to stop. I don't think they want to stop. So till the next time, may your ERP and your spirituality reign strong. God.